Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Telstra Connected Cycling series. It's great to see everybody in their pain caves, pedaling away, or on their bush, beach, track, or neighbourhood streets, walking or joining us from homes and getting their day started in this inspiring way. We are thrilled to have our numbers growing each week as news goes out about this workout and our chat with inspirational Aussies, and hear how the impact of this program continues from all the feedback and the conversations coming to us all during the week. This is our 17th week of experimenting, developing and iterating this Telstra Connected series initiative, and our steering committee of Sandy Woolley, Diane Hannon, Kurt Houston, Anna Mallon and John Pitchinen are absolutely delighted that everyone is finding it's making an impact on their week and to their health and well-being. Now, we've heard from Tour de France champions, pro cyclists, past and present. We've heard from commentators, has-been swimmers like me, coaches, Olympic gold medalists in plenty of different sports, including rowing, swimming, beach volleyball, and even the last man standing himself, speed skater Steve Bradbury. Now, the Telstra Connected Cycling's motto is connecting people and technology through the passion for cycling. And with that stated, here is our ride director, Mr. Sandy Woolley, to give us a state of play and an update on how the series is going. Sandy. Sandy, you're on mute. Got a bit of feedback, so we're just going to mute everybody.
Am I there now?
There you go, mate.
We got some Boeing jets out there. Thanks, Duncan. Well, Telstra Connected Cycling has been providing an activity and place for people to connect around healthy habits that cycling provides for about the last 18 months or so. And when COVID hit, instead of being shut down and out of action, there was a whole group of us who asked ourselves a very simple but important question. And how do we keep the great work of Telstra Connected Cycling going no matter what stage of lockdown we're in? So we came up with a plan, and our first experiment was, as Duncan said, 17 weeks ago. We had a very intimate discussion with Geoff. We started with a crowd of about 20 people. Now, after many iterations, we're impacting the mental health and well-being of hundreds of people around the world every week with inspirational sporting stories and while we exercise, and it's fantastic. So welcome again, particularly to our non-cyclists. I think it's been impressive how many we've actually got to join and listen to these stories and really have a feel-good start to your Wednesday. What we love is the growing numbers every week, and we've seen more women joining us, which we love to have gender equality in all the things we do at Telstra, which is fantastic. I think what we've learned is everyone ultimately wants to be part of something. And so what our guests do is not as important as the strength they display. Their stories about setback and sometimes failure and how they dealt with it and the lessons learned. I think we can all get something from those stories and why we see so many want to dial in. A big thank you to the executives of Telstra as part of supporting Telstra Connected Cycling and a broader program we're going to be launching called the Telstra Get Together program. So a particular call out to all in the senior leadership team of Telstra. With that, I'm going to go back on mute and hear the wonderful story of Jake Bailey and Geoff Coombes from Tour de Cure and all the wonderful work that they're doing. Tour de Cure, a key partner for us in our Get Together program. And back to you, Duncan.
Hey, thanks, Sandy. And you just keep on huffing and puffing, mate. It gives me sort of like a weird pleasure to see you huffing and puffing for 45 minutes on Wednesday morning. Good luck, mate. Thanks for leading out the group. Now, as always, if you have a question for our special guest this morning, please send it through on the Webex message board, which will be on the right on your screen, and we'll get to it during this convo. Now, a bit later on in the call, in about 45 minutes, we'll also have a wrap-up from the bunch. And this morning we'll be joined by Queensland Client Exec Michelle Lambert. So Michelle's going to be joining us a little later. So this morning we have not one, but two great additions to our lineup of inspirational guests to this series. And one of them is from across the Dutch. And we welcome our first New Zealand guest. That's right, we're going country to country. So it's my privilege to introduce everyone to an incredible young man named Jake Bailey, who's going to share his story of courage and overcoming in his battle with a rare and aggressive cancer, And alongside him this morning, we welcome our first return guest to the Telstra Connected series. He's the co-founder and director of the hugely successful Tour de Cure organisation and a great supporter of our series. A man many on the call would have ridden beside over many kilometres and is familiar with so many others, Geoff Coombes. And he's going to share the TDC, g'day mate, the TDC story about in these crazy times, and also explain how people like Jake Bailey partner in with TDC to make an impact on the cancer community. So welcome, gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to have you along. Jake, we're going to start with you, mate. You're a young man living on the Gold Coast now, doing incredible work to impacting lives as a motivational speaker. But 5 years ago, you ran into a very aggressive cancer. You gave a speech, which we've put in the links here and we put on our LinkedIn marketing for this particular call to have you along. I guess you never thought when you had the cancer diagnosis that you would end up in this position 5 years later.
Yeah, sure. Morning, Duncan. Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to come along, I suppose, in a sense, and join you on your ride and have a bit of a chat as well. Absolutely, you're completely right, Duncan, in the sense that this is a position which I don't think anyone would have ever expected themselves falling into. And I say it without a hint of irony that I didn't know that public speaking was a career until I actually fell into it and started doing it full time. So to have come out of high school, aged 18, and since been given the opportunities to be able to hopefully create some sort of positive benefit for people who, the many people, I suppose, who walk a similar path to the one which I did is a real honour. And to be able to be involved with Tour de Cure and groups like yourselves throughout that process is still part of that journey for me.
Well, let's talk about the start of your journey, because the first time we ever knew of the name Jake Bailey is when you went on a viral video right around the world, when you gave a speech at your high school graduation at Christchurch Boys High School. And the way you presented that and the courage that you were showing, just tell us about your diagnosis in the first place and what led up to that viral video.
Sure, absolutely. So diagnosis came towards the end of my final year at high school. So I was 18 years old at the time. I was living a very typical life for an 18-year-old guy. I suppose you could say it was, in a sense, exams, study, preparing for university and sport, and it would have been, a girlfriend and some partying and some mates sort of mixed into that as well. And towards the end of that year, I began to develop some quite odd symptoms, sort of wisdom pain around the wisdom teeth and in my jaw. And it was as my wisdom teeth were coming through, so it wasn't necessarily, shocking or surprising. But from there, I began to lose a lot of weight. I lost about 12 kgs in a period of 10 days or so. And lost the sensation in the lower half of my face, as what turned out later to be tumours began to compress the nerves which supply sensation to the lower half of the face. So as my condition sort of gradually deteriorated, there was more and more medical intervention. And after a series of tests and procedures, from MRI scan, PET scan, CT scan, gum biopsy, kidney biopsy, ultrasound, spinal tap, all sorts of measures and procedures, it was basically a Thursday afternoon, and I was in my hospital bed in my hospital room after having been admitted about a week prior. And a lady who I hadn't met before came into the room, and she sat down on the bed beside me. She introduced herself as a hematologist, and I didn't really know what one of those was. And she went on to explain to me very slowly and very calmly that I basically had cancer. I had a type of cancer called Burkitt's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is the fastest growing cancer known to man, and unfortunately capable of doubling in size every 24 to 48 hours. And that at that point, the cancer was well and truly stage 4. It was in my brain lining, my eye sockets, my nasal passages, my sinuses, my gums, my jaw, my spinal fluid, my pancreas, and in both of my kidneys. So obviously, not necessarily the news you're expecting to receive at any point, but particularly as a young man, not something which you'd see yourself staring down the barrel of. But she explained to me that without treatment, I had about 2 weeks left to live, and that even with treatment, I didn't really have a guarantee of life either way. So from that point, I was very quickly swept up into a whole bunch of, the medical world in terms of treatment and procedures and preparations for chemotherapy. And my speech to my high school, which some people might recognise, came probably 4 or 5 days after that diagnosis, at what would have been really probably the lowest point in my treatment. As it was put to me by my haematologist, I was simultaneously dying from cancer and still having the effects of the chemotherapy at the same time. So it was a bit of a double whammy, but it was a fantastic opportunity to speak to the boys of the school, which I'd been honoured to lead as the head student, or the school captain, I believe you call them. And it was an honour, and I was very fortunate that as a result of that, there was some sort of attention which came from that, which has given me the opportunity to go on and share the elements of my story which have benefited me positively coming through that experience.
Well, as a father of 5, when you say that the haematologist sat on your bed and gave you that really, really devastating news, and you're such a young person at the time, what did you hear? Could you articulate at that stage, or was it almost like you heard bits and pieces of it and it was a surreal happening to somebody else moment? Or how did you even cope with the next 24 hours? Because your family would have been coping in their way. But how did you articulate what the hematologist told you on the end of your bed that day?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess do you have teenage boys? And that mix of...
I do.
Yeah,
I've had teenage boys, and I'm going to have teenage boys again. I've got 5 of them, so I've got to be in this for a while. But,
as you all know, then all teenage boys are 10 foot tall and bulletproof. So, fortunately, when I was staring down the barrel of that diagnosis, I can genuinely say that within that moment, I felt absolutely nothing, and that's quite a common sort of question which I get from people is, what is it like to find out you might have 2 weeks to live? And the answer is, disappointingly boring, I suppose, in the sense that there was no particular emotion associated with that, and certainly not the ones that you'd expect of fear or anger or sadness. None of these negative emotions really come to mind. And I suppose I've increasingly questioned that since that time. But I suspect, like I said, that the reason for that is simply, my brain was genuinely incapable of, pondering my own mortality. I just genuinely believe that there was no way that I could sort of, comprehend what I was facing. And I think that's sort of been the overarching sort of theme of the experience that I've been through, is that it's only as I reach 22, nearly 23 now, that I increasingly begin to grasp the severity of what that experience was. But I can genuinely say at the time, I had no fear that I was going to die, and I had no doubt that I was going to survive. And I don't think that was any form of positive thinking or any conscious action of courage or bravery. I just genuinely believe I was 18 years old and very naive and very dumb and very lucky at the end of the day.
I think it speaks a great deal about your character, of who you were, if you couldn't articulate that. And I think that part of the story where you said, look, I was the head boy or school captain, and the determination that you showed to be in treatment, and still determined to give that speech at the end of the year. How did you write that speech? Because yes, you're going to do it because you're determined. It speaks volumes about your character and the courage that you have in your heart. But how did you write that? Because it is such a stunning speech. It is such a profoundly impactful speech for everybody who listens to it. And, 5 years later, you can watch it again and just like, wow, how did you do it? How did you write it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point you make there. So actually the speech was largely written prior to my diagnosis, which sort of brings a whole other interesting element into it, where a lot of the things which I suppose I wrote about or intended to speak about became so much more poignant, or took on a lot more meaning subsequent to that diagnosis. But I guess, a lot of the inspiration or feeling that was around that initial plan for that speech was, simply what I thought was important to communicate to the young guys who I'd been leading. And I suppose, the drive or ambition to give that speech despite the predicament in which I'd found myself just came from what an honour it had been really to be able to have led those boys throughout my year of high school, and an obligation to try and finish the year as strong as I'd started it, really.
I always look at great speeches. You can see great speeches throughout history of stuff. And what I really key into as someone who loves great speeches is the effect it's having on people around you as the speech is being said. And to see that group of teachers and headmasters and school leaders around you and how close they were standing to you as you presented that speech, and, you know, the hand on the shoulder, and then when it was over, they moved into you and they had to touch you almost, you know, to give you that support. It was a really, when you look at it, what does it do for you now, Jake, to look at that group of people who are so supportive in your life at that time?
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly special thing, and I suppose in a lot of ways, it's as time goes on, it's more and more unusual, because I imagine if all of you looked back on a video or a moment in time from your high school years, there's a lot of people there who you probably were connected to or close to in some way at the time, and increasingly less and less as time has gone on, and as it works with leaving high school. I suppose that's the same experience for me, but I think, you know, there will always be some kind of connection between myself and those people through that experience and through that moment in time. So to look back on it now is, yeah, it gets more and more distant as time goes on, but I always had a feeling of disconnect from that experience. I genuinely never could remember large parts of that speech or of that time around there, because I had been incredibly unwell prior to the speech, very shortly after the speech, fortunately not during the speech, although I probably still would have gone viral, but just for a completely different reason. So it was always a sense of watching myself do something which I didn't quite remember. And as I explain it to the 18-year-old high school students I speak to, it's probably for them like, you know, waking up on Sunday morning and their mates have put up a bunch of Snapchat videos of them doing terrible things last night, which they don't really remember, and they have to sit there and watch it and endure it. And I suppose in a sense I have that same kind of disconnect of, wait, was that me? Did I do that?
Yeah. Well, we're very grateful that you did it, because 5 years down the track we get to talk to you and hear about your life, and talk about that speech and how it's had that profound impact on so many. I'm going to switch now to Geoff. Geoff's in a airplane hangar on his deadly treadly, pedaling away with the group. Geoff, Jake's story with the Tour de Cure. The Tour de Cure has been going since 2007. You're the co-founder and director of this incredibly huge juggernaut of a undertaking that is just helping people like Jake who are diagnosed with cancer. And the thing is, every family in Australia is going to be touched by cancer. It's an incredible stat. And is that one of the reasons why Tour de Cure for you has become your life?
Yeah, look, Jake's amazing, and I don't know that we help Jake. Jake definitely helps us. The reason why we started Tour de Cure was to give back. Cancer needed the most help, and then it wasn't personal at the time. But now, 13, 14 years later, my mum's had it. We've lost people who have become involved with it. We're all where we are, all going to experience it, whether it's firsthand or through a loved one. So I'm sick of it. Just want to do what we can to fund the research and raise the awareness and educate people around how they can prevent it. And long may we continue.
I love your tagline with Tour de Cure, mate. Finding a cure for cancer, because that's the big picture, isn't it? Like, you use a word you use the word agnostic in Tour de Cure, because it's all cancers that you're going on. Can you just dig into that agnostic and how you came to that sort of, because we've got breast cancer, we've got bowel cancer, we've got prostate cancer, we've got all these wonderful undertakings like walks and runs and things like that. But Tour de Cure does something slowly. You pivoted just a little bit away from tackling just one, haven't you?
Yeah, I remember when we first started, and as I said, we didn't start saying we had to help cancer. We wanted to help the Australian health landscape. Cancer needed the most help, so we thought, right, we'll do 4 years. We'll try and raise $2 million. And we remember we wanted to set up we want to help research, support, and prevention. And it wasn't just the researchers, and it wasn't just those dealing with it. And we wanted to help men, women, and children. So I think that kind of set that framework for being across so many that you couldn't focus on one. And then years later, we helped breast cancer, prostate cancer, and camp quality in year one. And now it's like, right, we just want to fund the brilliant researchers. So if the researchers are out there and they need the funding and they qualify in our measure of it, then we want them to get the funding. So yeah, we're not pursuing of any one particular, but there's lots of cancers that need help. We probably fund more into some of those rarer cancers now than what we used to. But yeah, it's a pleasure to do.
Okay, so let's look at the stats. You kicked off here in Brisbane in 2007 with a fantastic host at your first event that he set you on your way to success. I'm sure it was all about that host. You've raised over $60 million in the last 13 years, but this is where the rubber hits the road. You've funded 432 world-class cancer researchers. You've supported and prevention projects. You've achieved 29 major scientific cancer breakthroughs with your funding and the effort of people walking, running, adventuring, pedaling around the country, around the world, with over 20 signature events or 20 events every single year. So it's such an impressive resume. But which part of that, data, wonderful background and we've brushed over the 13 long years of hope, hard work, late nights, administration, keeping people safe on the road and things like that. So that's brushing over sort of the enormity of the effort. So please forgive me. But which part of that data gives you, as the co-founder and one of the directors, the biggest thrill?
Oh, you actually missed one in there, which was the 150,000 kids that we've engaged in our message around being fit, healthy and happy. So that's my, agenda now more than anything else. I know we're going to raise lots of money. I know we engage great organisations and passionate people who, high achieving in every sense of the word, but getting that message into schools and communities and workplaces that we partner with around the healthy outcomes that we can achieve through making lifestyle choices. That's the part that 150,000 kids that go home and nag mum and dad to, do more exercise, to put some extra fruit in their lunchbox, to, consider those healthy choices, to nag mum and dad to go and get a skin check.
Yeah, get a skin check, slip, slop, slap, all those messages that seem to come and go and need to be reinforced. 150,000 kids. Well done, mate. We're going to come back and talk to you in just a second. So, Jake, you get delivered the news, you get up on stage, you give a speech that's heard all around the world. 5 years later, we're still playing the speeches and things like that. What did you do? You moved into treatment before the speech, of course, but what did the treatment entail, and how were you able to maintain that hope with such an aggressive, not only cancer, but such an aggressive diagnosis of it metastasizing and doubling in size every 24 hours? How did you cope?
Sure. So yes, from that point, I was in the treatment, and the treatment was solely chemotherapy. So I was in a pretty fortunate position where the faster the cancer grows, typically the better it responds to chemotherapy. And because of that, my treatment period was only about 90 days or thereabouts. I was actually announced in remission 3 months to the day after I'd been diagnosed, which you can't sort of underestimate how fortunate it is you are to really be in that position when you see what the grueling endurance event of chemotherapy and treatment is for a lot of cancer sufferers, whether it be 1 year or 5 years or 10 years. So the treatment that I went through was dubbed salvage protocol, which is never really a great sign when the doctors are referring to using salvage protocol on you. I never pulled them up on that or discussed it with them, but I think there wasn't really that much to be said about it anyway. And it consisted really of just chemotherapy each day for about 21 days or so, and then about 7 days or 10 days of rest at the end of that time. So I had 4 cycles of chemotherapy, and subsequent to that, I was announced in remission on the 29th of January 2016. So I guess through that period, to answer your question, how did you find hope? How do you find motivation to keep on going? And so, I mean, there's so many different answers to that, in the sense that it's a very human desire to wish to survive something like that, combined with that teenage naivety of the fact that I never wasn't going to survive that, at least in my head, although perhaps not in reality. There's the family and the people around you. But I guess at my lowest points, I think what I found kept pushing me through that experience was basically the knowledge that other people on that ward that I was on were doing it tougher than I was. So I was in a place called the BMTU, the Bone Marrow Transplant Unit at Christchurch Hospital, and basically I was doing isolation before it was cool to do isolation. So I was in a double airlocked room, so you had to go through, you come up to the first door, you wash your hands, and then you go through into the airlock and you sanitize your hands, and you come out the other side of the airlock. And then you're on the ward, and then you enter through another door into an airlock, and then you sanitize your hands again, and then you enter through into my hospital room door, and then you sanitize your hands one final time as you come through the door. So I was in there by myself, but there was an awareness of the other people on the ward around me. There wasn't necessarily any interaction with them, but there was an awareness. You'd certainly see them sort of shuffling down the corridor outside your window at times. And I guess what one story which sticks out for me was the guy in the room next door to me he was a pilot actually, and he had a form of quite aggressive brain cancer. And what the doctors were doing for him is they had drilled, I mean, they would say that inserted a port into his skull, but I guess at the end of the day, there's only so many ways you can put. I've drilled a hole in this guy's head. And what they would do is they would put chemotherapy directly through the hole in the guy's head into his brain every day. And I guess for me, at my lowest points, I would sort of ponder the fact that, the guy in the room next door to me is undoubtedly doing it tougher than I am, and he is undoubtedly just as human and as real as I am. He's, flesh and blood and emotion. And if he can get through it, then sort of what is my excuse for not being able to get through this? And you've got to be careful when you approach things that way. There's a very fine line between boosting your own courage and bravery from other people's stories and diminishing your own experiences or invalidating your own emotions around that. But I guess for me, if you can find the right balance between the two, and you can walk that fine line, then you can draw a lot of strength from other people's experiences. And I think at some of my lowest and darkest points, certainly that was what I took away from the other people on the ward around me.
So you're getting inspiration from the people around you. You're drawing on that. You're using it as a strength, and you're moving towards, after 90 days, recovery. So what the transition between treatment to a point we've done all we can, did you start feeling like, right, I'm really recovering from this. I'm really getting through this. And what was that transition like? Was life sweeter? That's the call that everyone wants to know from you on the internet. How sweet was life when you started recovery? How sweet was life when your hope was restored? When your body started to fill out again? When you came past and your hair started to grow again and things like that? What was that transition like?
It was delayed is the answer. So towards the end of my chemotherapy, I developed a condition called peripheral neuropathy, which is, for want of a more simple way to break it down, the chemotherapy attacks things which grow inside your body. Your nerves grow inside your body. Your chemotherapy attacks your nerves, and much as often a severed spinal column will leave you paraplegic because the messages won't get through from your brain to your legs. I was very much in the same position where the chemotherapy had damaged the nerves in my legs enough that I was left unable to walk at the end of my treatment. So I was either on two crutches, sort of dragging my legs around behind me and sort of stumbling and bumbling all over the place, or if I was feeling a little bit more respectable that day, I'd suck it up and sit down in a wheelchair, although I really didn't like to do that. And so actually the day when I was announced in remission, I was undoubtedly at my physically lowest point, I think, throughout the entirety of my treatment. And the worst part was that this continued on afterwards. So nerves are the slowest growing part of the body. And because of that, recovery from a neurological condition like this is, first of all, it's uncertain. So the doctors told me, you need to prepare for the fact you may never walk again unassisted, and you'll never run again. You'll certainly never ride a bike again. And they said that, even best case scenario, it's going to be a case of wait and see. And in my situation, it was a case of waiting for a number of months. But I suppose what that experience did for me was, it was very disorienting, because there was a sense of, yes, I've beaten cancer for now, I guess with my cancer, there is a substantial chance of a relapse sitting somewhere between, 1 in 3 and 1 in 4. So, when it's over, it's never really over. But I guess the immediate focus at that time was, great, I don't have to go back into hospital. I don't have to stay in this ward. I don't have to have more treatment or procedures. But at the same time, I'm actually at my physically my lowest point, certainly mentally my lowest point. I think that experience with being unable to walk left me unable to play the sport, which I'd always played, or to go back to the job, which I'd been working, or to even go and hang out with my mates at times, because, I couldn't walk around. I couldn't, get up the stairs at their house. I couldn't do a lot of these things, which would have been very conducive to going back to a normal life, or the life I'd had before my experience with cancer. And with that came a whole bunch of different challenges for me. So the period of readjustment was, it was delayed for sure. When it started to happen a number of months later, it was a pretty cool thing. But in the meantime, there was a real sense of a blank slate or a fresh canvas in terms of I've finished school at this point, which it sounds very inconsequential when I say it out loud, but I guess there is a sense of what do I do with myself for the rest of my life now? Because I'd had plans for university, I'd had my accommodation and courses all set up, and then there was no, you're not going to university now. And there was no, you can't go back to your sport or your job, or all your mates are moving away to universities all over the country. Now your girlfriend's moved over to Australia for her university, and now you're back stuck at home on the couch with your parents, unable to go to the kitchen and get yourself a drink because your legs don't work. So it was a really challenging time. But I'm incredibly grateful that my legs are back to 100% now. I'm perpetually, out there punishing them on the bike or on the trail runs or whatever it needs to be to exact some revenge for the time that they failed me.
So tell us, how did you suck it up? Because when I think about me as a teenager, if my girlfriend has gone to another country, I'm on my parents' couch, my legs don't work, I'm not going to go to university, I've beaten the cancer, which is extraordinary. But how did you do that? Because that would have just led to a massive tantrum for me that would have lasted months and months and months and months. So what, did you deploy tools? Did you do mindfulness? Did you do meditation? How did you do it at such a young age to show that kind of courage to suck it up?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, but I guess at the end of the day, there's only so many of these different elements that you can try and bring in to try and negate any of the negative parts of this experience. And at the end of the day, sometimes the only way that you can get through it is just to sit with that feeling. And actually something which my mum sort of imprinted the importance of on me when I was younger is just the ability to be able to sit with an uncomfortable feeling or sensation, and the fact that unfortunately sometimes things are just going to suck like they did back then. But there was a lot of hope out on the other side of that. There was a lot of possibility and a lot of opportunity that was sort of awaiting me as soon as these things could begin to improve and begin to get better for me. And I guess at the end of the day, there's no better way to feel good about your life than to just be grateful to have it. And that's not some big sort of philosophical statement there. That's just, I was genuinely just coming out of that experience and just grateful to sort of still be around to experience anything, even if it was these negative emotions. It was better than, being in a hospital bed again or being in a box in the ground. Amazing outlook.
Are you a goal setter, Jake? Do you write lists? Do you put a big, fat, hairy goal out there, a BHAG that you want to move towards? Because you quickly, as your legs got better, you quickly got into the activity of achieving things. And the bike is one of them, and that's why we've got you on the Telstra Connected Cycling series, because of your love of the bike now. When did that arrive? And are you a goal setter?
Yeah, I guess goal setting on and off, I suppose, in a sense, and also in a sense not. I think long-term goals, absolutely, you need to have some sort of compass to steer you in the right direction. But I think actually one of the most important things which my experience with cancer taught me was really the importance of bringing things back to short-term goals. Because if I had gone into that experience and I had looked at the 100 or so days of chemotherapy ahead of me, all of these terrible medical procedures which I was going to go through, would have really seemed like a mountain which was impossible to conquer. So I think that experience really taught me the importance or the value of just focusing on these short-term goals as opposed to looking too far into that distance. In terms of the bike, you refer to a love of the bike. I'm not sure if that's the most accurate term. There's a begrudging enjoyment times potentially.
So what is it? What do you get out of the bike? If it's begrudgingly getting on the saddle and sitting there and pedaling away, and it doesn't tick all those boxes of, that crazy suffering addict inside. What is it about the bike that you love?
I think it's the people. I think it's the
Okay.
experience of the people, and I guess primarily as well, it serves a purpose in terms of creating positive change with Tour de Cure. If it wasn't for Tour de Cure, then I certainly wouldn't ride like I do, and I certainly wouldn't have got into riding either. But I'm not sure if I'd really ride that much outside of it at all. But as I joked on tour last year, I think I've probably got some of the most altruistic motives there, because I think a lot of these guys just love the opportunity to go away and with their mates, and I can guarantee that I'm not in it for the love of being in the saddle. I'm in it for the love of the amazing work which Tour de Cure and Geoff do. And for the experience of being with these incredible people as well, and getting to sort of know some of these stories, because my experience is so far from unique or so far from special. There are so many people who have, and there'll be so many people listening to this now who have the same story or a similar story from a loved one around them. And so to be able to meet some of these incredible people and see the incredible work which they do, and to be inspired by that I think that's my passion.
So Geoff, what type of rider is Jack, mate? Is he any good in a bunch ride? Is he one of those novel guys that you hate sitting behind because he doesn't know how to ride straight, or does he drop his bottle through the group on occasion, or what type of rider is Jake when he joins the group, Tour de Cure group?
Jake's got the physique of a cyclist. He could be an absolute weapon, and he's definitely capable. Don't let him undersell whether he can hold on to a wheel and he's any good. Look, I've seen Jake go through some pain, and on that tour we did last year, we hit some weather that was some of the worst we've ever experienced, and the conditions really challenged all of us. And I know Jake brought in a little injury as well, which made it even harder. But no, the boy can ride.
So as a co-founder of this organisation, what does it do to you when you see and hear and get touched by and then meet Jake, and he comes on board the program and he lends his incredible strength and character to an already brilliant program? What does it do to you personally, Geoff, to have people like Jake come along and really, break out on tour and affect so many people?
Doug, I remember back when we reached out to you and got you involved in our very first tour, and I think that was one of the most nervous things I did in that first year, if I remember correctly. And then over the years, we've, Drew's joined us, Kate Bates has joined us, Tracy Gaudry, Nick Green. We've had so many elite, high-performing, accomplished people. Jake brings another element to our portfolio of people, and that inspires me. That gets all of us realising just how lucky we are. It puts perspective in why we go out there and do what we do, knowing that Jake, his cancer would have been a death sentence 10, 15 years ago. That side of seeing the progress, and that resonates more than almost anything else for our team.
But you must have to gird your loins sometimes, because, you ride 1,000 kilometres in 6 days or 1,500 kilometres in 8 days, and you take people like Jake along, you put them in the envelope, but it's really up to you to make sure they kind of have a good experience, hopefully get to the end of the tour, don't fall off their bike, don't get injuries, have this fulfilling time, and then spread the word and make the impact on the health and well-being community and the cancer community about what the Tour de Cure does. It puts a lot of responsibility on your shoulders as one of the co-founders and directors. How do you cope with that?
Look, mate, I think we've got an amazing team, and I've always kind of reflected back on the people who you get involved and who give so much. They're the ones that are positively reflecting on us. Any of the people out there, it's your employees and the impact they can have through their team. Look, we have a great time. We've got a little bit of secret sauce that we bring to every tour. It's always different. There's a great physical challenge. You know, it's absolutely not about the bike. You know, we've done days that are epic, and we probably won't do those epic days again as we all get a little bit older, and, you know, we can tick that box. But making sure, getting everyone through safe, and again, 13 years later and as many tours, I think we're up to 55 odd tours that we've done. You know, you understand some of the human dynamics of when people need a lift, when they need a break, when we can put certain people around them, and, you know, the strongest of our ride leaders have tough days that they need to, you know, withdraw from being the guides on the road. So it's being aware of all that, and again, having amazing people in our team that respond well to that. You know, we want to deliver amazing outcomes to people, and then through them, they're the ones that are the high-achieving, ambitious fundraisers that see us all kind of high-five at the end of an amazing tour with a huge amount of money going towards a cause that we're all desperate to see an end to.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Well said, mate, because it must be so hard to juggle, you know, the fighter pilots out there who've done a bit of riding professionally, and then people like Jake coming on to have an experience and get into the well-being of it, and then other people who might be there who might have just lost someone, and they're doing it for someone, and they've got that cause going. It must be very, very difficult sometimes to get that balance right in terms of how far you go in the light, embracing the darkness at the end of the day, making sure the coffee van is supposed to be where it is to make sure the riders are completely coffeeed up, which is a very,
I remember
time.
a mutiny we almost had when the Victoria coffee van broke down. You know, that's something which we'll make sure never happens again.
I think we can all understand that, mate, on the bike. So, ladies and gentlemen, get your questions in, because we're slowly getting towards question and answer time. We're slowly getting to our time at the 45-minute mark, where the ride will come to an end. If you've got a question for Geoff and Jake, please put it in the comments, and we'll get to it very, very shortly. So, Jake, is that where the fulfillment is, getting in that great bunch of people at this stage? Is that your goals at the moment, just to share your story, spread the word about mindset, hope, overcoming any situation that people might get in? You're a motivational speaker now. You're living on the Gold Coast. You must be making an enormous impact with the work you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, I guess, where the focus is for me. And I guess that, you know, motivational speaker is got to be the world's worst term, because that pretty much implies just about the world's worst person, if you actually think about it. God, it's I'm virtually ashamed to speak about what I do. So, okay, I call it public speaking.
Yeah, let me put it this way: you're engaged by corporations and great big crowds to tell your story, to inspire and give impact. How about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that works for me. As long people say, I say, oh, well, you know, what do you do? Public speaking. Oh, like Tony Robbins, and not like Tony Robbins, like the opposite of Tony Robbins. I think if you picture a Kiwi, then it's sort of incompatible with that sort of style of speaking. But I mean, that's actually, I think people quite sort of embrace that and like that as well, in a sense. And I've done some work over in the US with various groups, and I think that even the Americans enjoy a bit of a break from the Americans sometimes. So I think that's where the focus is. That's where my goals are, and that doesn't, like I said earlier, doesn't really come from necessarily any altruistic purposes. I'm not saying that I'm any more altruistic or any better than anyone in that regard, but I guess the understanding which I have is that I've been through an experience which so many people go through. The only difference is that I've been fortunate enough to sort of come at the other side of it with an opportunity or a platform from which to share a lot of these messages or lessons which these other people who have gone through the same experiences I have also received. They just don't necessarily have the ability or the opportunity to share those as quite as readily as I do. So for the past 4.5 years, I've worked with everyone from development rugby squads in New Zealand to prisoners in New South Wales to retirement homes in Sydney to 4-year and 5-year-olds in classrooms on the remote west coast in New Zealand, through to US Department of Agriculture, American Rangers, and things like that. And it's been a real mix of experiences. But I guess what has defined that period of my life for me is just the gratitude that I have for the opportunity to be able to share these lessons, which, like I said, are not that uncommon. I think there's a lot of people who sort of feel this way, and I just feel incredibly grateful to be able to go on and share some of these lessons with people. And I guess where I see myself moving forward from here is a lot of work which I'm doing with young people back in New Zealand, based around resilience. So I guess I see resilience for me as being, a key factor in my story, but probably the greatest factor in dictating how happy or successful anyone's life is. Far more so than their wealth or their health or their connections or their luck, as some people would put it. I think it's far more important to be born able to get back up after you've taken a knock than it is to be born with $1 million in the bank. So I guess that's where my focus is moving forward. I want to be able to create a generation of increasingly resilient young New Zealanders who are able to go on and be successful in their life simply because of their ability to continue getting up and continue moving forward when they're given a setback or knocked down a little bit.
Great answer. Gratitude's a big prime mover for you. Talking about that resilience in Kiwiland, we've got a question from the bunch. It says, how did the Christchurch earthquake impact you with the community and all the disruption?
Yeah, sure. So I was 13 at the time of both of the earthquakes, actually. The September one, which was a little bit lower profile, and of course the February one, which was the significant earthquake that people sort of remember if you say Christchurch earthquake. And I guess in that time, probably the thing which sticks out for me the most about that experience is the sense of unity and connection which can come from uniting around a cause like that. And I suppose in a lot of ways there are a lot of parallels between that experience and the Tour de Cure family. Because I can genuinely say that, the Tour de Cure family are a group of people unlike any I've ever met before. And that feeling of connection with them is unlike one which I've really experienced in many situations. But I think of all those situations, one of which would come closest is probably the Christchurch earthquakes, and that feeling of uniting around a cause to positively benefit everyone and to try and create positive change is something powerful. But the Christchurch earthquakes, yeah. We lost our house. Eventually it was livable for a while, but it was one of those situations where, people were affected so much more significantly than I was. But I guess on a broader sense, yeah, it's shown me the power of, the ability to pull together really during tough times.
Unbelievable. Question for Jeffrey. Some of our walkers, we have many walkers on our Telstra Connected Cycling series. What events do you put on for walkers, mate?
We've looked at it. We do a number for our corporate partners, and I remember when CommBank engaged us to try and help with a program around engaging, inspiring their organisation. We originally had, I think it was 60 male executives, all beating their chests and going for a ride, and it didn't reach across, and certainly didn't endear us to lots of people. And the challenge of doing a walk was thrown to us, and it's not in our DNA, but running events and putting the logistics together and then bringing that magic that I mentioned, and I love it when Jake kind of talks a little bit to that. So now we have probably 8 or 9 21-kilometre walks that we do around the country. Last year we had 5,500 people around the country take on those walks. So yeah, I don't think it's not to be underestimated doing a walk of that size. I've saddled up for a few and realised that there's a lot to be said for walk conditioning compared to cycling. So yeah, we don't have any public events as yet, but we are looking at bringing them into some of our other events. So we do an event called the Discovery Tours, so in each of the different states. And it's likely that on the last day of those, we're going to have a walk that would then culminate in everyone finishing together, brings families to the finish line. Might be a beautiful walk through a vineyard where the tour is finishing, and we'll get to come and then celebrate and have lived that healthy lifestyle.
And quickly, mate, COVID, it's knocked the stuffing out of so many great organisations. We don't know the end of it yet. Victoria, of course, has again been sent back home again, and we feel for all our Victorian brothers and sisters and families down there. How's your organisation changing to cope with COVID, or to try to understand what the new world after COVID looks like for an organisation like you?
Yeah, good question. So we're on a semi-hibernation at the moment. We work out, well, we knew 83% of our revenue comes through from the events. So we can't run events at the moment, and even the likelihood of getting any events away before the end of this year seems to be slipping away from us. So changing, pivoting, understanding how we can be relevant. The organisations that we're proudly working with are helping us think that way as well. So we'll get into events that are in a virtual sense, not necessarily the augmented reality of Zwift, but certainly trying to look at how we could create a journey for people to go on with it. But yeah, it has highlighted that what we do and the growth that we've had over the years and 60 million that we've raised, we are very reliant on the events revenue. We don't get any government fundings. Our strategy around high net worth and government bequests and bequests, they're areas that we need to recognise and look at. But then our space is working with people. So how do we give them the opportunity to stay involved and connected? And cancer isn't, taking a break, nor can we.
Great answer, mate. Well, good luck with that, and we're proud to be alongside you for some of that journey, mate. Hey, listen, we've got one last question from the group here. It's going to be for Jake, and then we're going to go to our comment from the bunch, which will be with Michelle Lambert. So this is from Kieran. Hey, Jake, tell us your favourite story where someone has told you that your story has inspired them to do something in their life. You must get dozens of these, but do you have a fave? Do you have a couple of faves?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few which stick out. There was a mother who, with a fear of flying, particularly in small planes, whose 19-year-old son had just got his pilot's license, which is kind of two different incompatible factors, really. But I guess I met her once, and she joked with me that my story had sort of inspired her to get up in this plane with her son. So I feel like I may even owe her son an apology, because I can't imagine. You think of a nervous passenger in a car. I can't imagine a nervous passenger in a small plane. But I guess, yeah, I apologise if it comes across morbid, but I think it's relevant to the cause that we're talking about today. But I think for me, probably the stories which stand out most are other young people and their families who I've walked alongside, who have gone through the same experience that I have, who have had different outcomes. And I think, a lot of the families that I speak to, it's a funny thing, because a lot of the families that I speak to through that say, your story's given us so much hope for my son or my daughter. So thank you for the hope that you've given us, and that these kids often don't have the same outcome to their story that I do, and there's been a lot of scenarios of that, and it is it's increasingly more and more difficult as time goes on to be able to reconcile that. But I think that for me that's part of the drive. And coming back to my, begrudging enjoyment probably is even a bit of a stretch of cycling. I think, for me at least, when you're getting out of bed at, 4:30 or 5 or 5:30 or 6 or 6:30, whatever the time is, I think for me at least, you've got to do it for something bigger or better than you. And I guess in my experience, those experiences of meeting other young people who have gone through the same thing that I have, and have not come out the other side of it is what gets me out of bed to train for Tour de Cure. It's what gets me out of bed on Tour de Cure to do another 180 Ks on the road in the rain, in the cold, because I think that, and I've said before, I think that's why the people that Tour de Cure works alongside are so incredible, because I just genuinely believe that no one can really have any selfish motivation to do that. you can't go along and put yourself through 1,400 Ks over 9 days just because you enjoy it. There has to be some greater belief. There has to be some sort of greater drive to do that. And I think for people there, it's this sheer desire to create positive change. And I could genuinely say that the work that I've done with Tour de Cure and the experiences that I've had alongside them are some of the most powerful that I've had throughout my life. But yeah, to get to a very roundabout end or answer to your question, I think, yeah, the greatest link or connection that's come about for me from my experience with cancer and post that, and the greatest impact that I've seen it have on other people is actually the impact that it's sort of rebounded onto me, and the drive and motivation which it's given me to continue to create positive change. And just briefly, as Geoff mentioned before, my cancer was not treatable about 20 or 25 years ago. So at that time, it was just classed as a non-treatable illness. And if I had been diagnosed at that point, which is probably within the lifetime of everyone listening to this now, I'd assume, I would have really been left to die. And it's terribly morbid, but I literally would have probably sat around with my family and planned some details for my own funeral, aged 18, and then my family just would have gathered around and sort of watched me slip away over the next 2 weeks. But it's literally through the power of fundraising through groups like Tour de Cure that I'm actually here speaking to you guys right now today. It is solely through that I'm here, because my cancer, Burkitt's, it's not a money-making cancer. There's not a lot of money, therefore, for research and development. And if you go on Google, I can promise you'll find yourself a lot more untreatable cancers. And I've sort of only come to realize since my experience that an untreatable cancer is just one which hasn't had the money put into it yet. Just one which hasn't had the effort or the time put into cracking it. So with Tour de Cure, that's what we want to do. That's what Geoff's purpose is, and certainly what my purpose for being involved is. And I guess that's what drives me as well.
Well, you're delivering it, mate. Well said. A beautiful answer, and really rams home, what you've gone through and how we can all make a difference. We've got some calls coming through, and we just want to say from Kylie, thanks for sharing, Jake. That was unreal. That really hits home. 20 years ago, untreatable, from Michael Ackland. Great to have you along, Michael. And Kieran, thanks for sharing. Awesome, Jake. Well done, and thank you. Doesn't get better than giving people hope. So well done, mate. We're going to say goodbye in a second, but every week we have a thought and a comment from the bunch, and this morning we were pleased to have Michelle Lambert joining the series. Michelle is our Queensland client exec, and she joins us now. Michelle, please come off mute and share.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you can hear me okay. I'm out with the birds and the fruit bats and everything else. Really just wanted to do a bit of a call out, Jake. I did the same thing last year, not the same kind of cancer, but 18 rounds of chemo and major surgery. You really resonated your story. The two key things I got from my oncologist was exercise really helps with chemo. So just putting it out there, if anyone going through chemo, make sure they just keep moving. And my surgeon had told me attitude is everything. So I took that on, and that's what I did. And that's what I'm hearing here. And Geoff, I'm really keen to see you cure this, mate. It's just, like you said, it impacts so many people, and yeah, all behind it. And 6 months now I've been clear, and hopefully I'm here in 30 years telling people my story too. So Jake, very inspirational. Thank you all for letting me have a chat.
Thanks so much, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle. That's awesome. A great way to finish. So thank you, Jake. Thank you, Geoff, for sharing so deeply with us this morning. It was amazing to hear your story. And I don't know that you've got, I don't know how many people are on the call, 120 or so people. I know you've got all these people and more following your story now. And really, what really resonates more than anything else is the power of gratitude. How you've taken your gratitude, move away from your worries, set your sights on the next goal and move towards it. Amazing character, amazing strength. So thank you very much, Jake.
Thanks very much, guys. Really a real honour to have been here, like I said. And Michelle, thank you so much for sharing. Congratulations on your progress, and all the best for the rest of your journey with it as well.
And thanks, Geoff. Awesome to hear all about Tour de Cure. We love being in business with you at Telstra, and we're looking forward to a bright future, mate. After COVID, I'm sure you're going to pivot well and get on with business.
Thanks, Dunc. Look forward to, I think, seeing 180 odd people on the rides. I'd love to see 180 people on the road with us one day soon.
Oh, that'd be brilliant, mate. Brilliant, and as long as it's not 180k cycle, loop in the rain and the cold, that's where I'll be, on the couch. Anyway, on behalf of our ride director Sandra Woolley and the rest of the TCC Pro team of Diane Hannon, Kurt Houston, Anna Mallon, and John Pitchinen, thank you very much for your company. And whether you're riding, running, walking, or enjoying coffee with us this morning, have a great week. Show the gratitude. Show the power of gratitude, and we'll see you for our next rollout, which is 6:15, with another great guest next Wednesday. Stay safe, everybody.